I actually find, oh, Toaster, there's a little Dougie outside. Hey everyone, it's Natalie, also known as Knitty Natty. Welcome to episode 194 of the Love in Stitches podcast. So as you can see, it is the first episode here in our new home, which is a Class B RV or a Sprinter van. If you think of those like big Amazon delivery trucks, that's kind of what we are living in here. I have my buddy Toaster right here with me. So it's a new situation today. I actually have so many new things. I'm in a new space. I have a new camera. We're trying something new with the microphone. We do have windows open right now because we think our air conditioning is too loud to have on. So windows are open. It's a little breezy. It's raining outside. If things are not totally perfect today, just bear with us. We're going to figure this out and get things really, really nice for podcasting here in different and unique locations. So today we are in Lexington, Kentucky, and we are in the Kentucky Horse Park campground. Parked here last night and staying here tonight. So it's really great and really nice, and only my second night ever staying in a campground. Ken is actually behind the camera in the front of the van, and he is working on editing. So we'll see later if there's any little clicks in the background. You can blame that on him. So I'm so excited to share with you. I don't have a ton of knitting today, but I have so many other things to share with you. We've been to 14 yarn stores since the last podcast, so I have some yarn to share. I have some questions to answer. It's going to be a good one, so go ahead and grab a cup of tea, a coffee, a drink, whatever you are doing at this time of day. Get your yarn and let's get right to it.
We may have only been on the road for a few days, but one thing we've already learned about van life is anything you can do to make your life easier is worth it. And that's why we brought our Factor meals on the road with us. What we love about Factor is that on days like today, when we are extremely busy, we have so many videos to get out, we don't have to go to the grocery store, we don't have to chop anything, we don't have to cook anything or dirty any pans that we have to hand wash now. We can just select a meal and pop it in the microwave for 2 minutes. Let's see what we have. Kent, what do you want today? There's a couple different pork chop options, also a pork tenderloin. There's chorizo chili, ooh, and there's a jalapeno lime chicken that I think I might have my name on it. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are ready in just 2 minutes, so all I have to do is heat and enjoy. As you can see, I've already gotten started on my jalapeno lime chicken, and this right here is this cauliflower rice. It's like a little spicy with cilantro in it. Honestly, I've never had a Factor meal that I didn't absolutely enjoy. With 34 chef-prepared and dietitian-approved weekly options, there's always something new to try. Plus, you can round out your meal and replenish your snack supply with an assortment of 36 sweets, smoothies, juices, and other add-ons. Head to factor75.com/natty50 and use code natty50 to get 50% off your first Factor box. Thanks again to Factor for sponsoring today's video. Now, get out here so I can enjoy.
First up, I have been working on my Tessellated Pullover this week. This is the Rhinebeck sweater by Andrea Mowry. And last week I had just done ribbing. Okay, this is going to be new for me because, oh wow, this camera's nice. What do you think? Can you tell? My screen is now over here instead of above the camera to make sure everything's in focus, but that looks good. Yay! Okay, so I had just gone up to the ribbing last week, but now I am a few inches, maybe a couple of inches into the pattern part. I'm just getting to the blue color on the spin cycle that I really, really love, so I'm very excited about that. And you can see from my little popcorn stitch marker there, progress keeper, where I started earlier or last week. So nothing too exciting to share about this. I've just kind of been working on it here and there. I haven't had a ton of knitting time because we have been on the road traveling, going to lots and lots of yarn stores. I'll share more about that later. And it just was a lot of new stuff. And so this week really didn't feel like a normal week at all. But I think I'm going to get more and more used to traveling around, being in different places, and that's going to become the norm. And then I'll kind of settle back into my knitting. So this just got worked on a little bit. I'm almost through my first skein of the main color, which is a really lovely, like deep bluey green. It's called York. It is the Spinster's Daughter. It's like their new base with Spin Cycle between the Farmer's Daughter and Spin Cycle, and it's called York. I already have 2 more skeins wound up and ready to go. I made sure to do that before we left Toaster. Now you get a full view of Toaster doing all the things, doing all the things that Toaster does normally when you can't see him in the background there. So I'm almost done with that one, but prepared and ready for the next ones. And then I have another Farmer's Daughter yarn. This one is called Oh Dang, and the colorway is, what is it called? I'm looking for my label here. The colorway is A Case of You. And then the last yarn is just a Spin Cycle yarn. And like I was saying, I'm getting into the blues, which I'm very excited about. There's a ton of blue in here. My skein started out with yellow. All the yellow got incorporated into the swatch, just about. There's like a tinge of gray yellow at the very bottom of the body here. And then it went into some grays, and then now it's getting into the blues. And then I think it kind of goes maybe like back into some yellows, then some pinks and oranges. So I'm debating cutting some colors, but I think with all the colors there, see that one? That's kind of how it started out. With all the colors there, I think I'll like it a lot more than like my swatch, which was basically all yellow. It's still really pretty. It's just not very me. I like the pinks and the blues. So really liking how everything is turning out, how my colors are coming out. I only had one little thing happen where I was finally feeling relaxed enough to knit the last night, no, 2 nights ago, the first night that we stayed in the van. And I was like, oh, great. I'm going to like sit down and watch The Bachelor and relax. And I'm going to pull this out and work on it. I already worked on it a bit, but I wasn't paying good enough attention. And I accidentally used my Spin Cycle yarn for like twice in a row, for 2 pattern repeats in a row, when I'm supposed to alternate between the fluffy yarn and the Spin Cycle. So I basically worked 2 rows, realized something wasn't right, and then undid 2 rows, and that was all the knitting that I did for that night. But that's all right. So I think soon I will probably be in a state of mind where I can maybe start making some weekly goals for this sweater. I do want to finish it by Rhinebeck. Right now it feels so far away, but I know that's not true. It's October like 19th or 20th or 21st or something like that. So it's going to be here before we know it. And I have some other items I would like to make before then as well. So maybe in the next week or so, as we start settling into the van, I'll have a better plan for this and start really making some progress. My only other current project on the go, actually wait, what is the difference? I know there's like a difference between a WIP and a UFO. So a WIP is a work in progress, and a UFO is an unfinished object. I think WIP indicates that you are currently working on it. So like these 2 projects are my WIPs, but I do have a UFO or an UFO or an FO, unfinished object. I have a blanket that I left back in Tennessee because I still don't have the yarn to complete it yet, and it just didn't make sense to bring a bulky project when I didn't have the yarn to do it anyway. It's actually not that bulky. It's all the little squares for the Battenberg blanket, so that's going to be just waiting for me, and I will either get to it when I get back to Tennessee to my parents' house in November, or I will be having my parents send it to me at some point. We'll see. So anyway, the other project that I worked on is this sock. Let me tell you about the yarn first. It is Freckled Whimsy, and the color is called Keep On Keepin' On. Oh, nice. Good job, camera. That's awesome. I like this camera. We filmed 2 other videos with it, but I haven't actually done a podcast yet, so this is cool. I made a lot of progress this week. So if you remember last week, I had just put in, see this little skinny stripe here? That's waste yarn. It only goes around the back side. It doesn't go in the front. that is waste yarn for an afterthought heel. So I don't have any mini skeins that I bought with this. It wasn't a sock set, it's just a self-striping. And rather than look through and find a mini skein to go with it, I'm just going to use the self-striping for the entire sock. And I really like how self-striping yarn looks with afterthought heels, because you can pick up stitches and you can work in the round instead of working short rows for the heel. And that allows the stripes to kind of blend in a lot better to the sock. Essentially, it looks very similar to what the toe of a sock looks like with self-striping yarn. As you get fewer and fewer stitches, you of course get thicker stripes because the stripe goes further, but it looks better. It kind of looks like a bullseye to me. I think it looks better. So I'm saving space for the afterthought heel, and I have worked almost an entire foot. This sock is going to be for my mom. She picked up this yarn at Bliss Yarns, and so I just put in a little some more because I felt very campy, camping like. But I am really close. I've got my markers. So this indicates here where the heel starts, and then 20 rows into the foot, or I'm sorry, where I'm going to place the heel. 20 rows into the foot, 40 rows into the foot, and I just need to go 60, and then I can start decreasing for the toe. Oh, one thing that I did this week is that I actually, oh, that's what I was starting to say. I had placed the waist yarn for the heel in between, or by splitting a stripe. I had placed it right in the middle of this dark orange stripe. And then I was kind of putting off continuing on the sock. I was debating, like, do I really like how it's going to look when the heel is in there and there's like a skinny dark orange stripe on either side? Will I like that, or would I rather split in between stripes instead of splitting a stripe, go in between stripes? And I knew I would rather go in between stripes, but I kind of had to make a decision to either go further on the leg and heel transition that I intended, or back up a few rows and then maybe not have enough plain rows there. Because what I like to do, this is my perfect fit sock. I just got on my eye. Hold on. There we go. Okay. This is my perfect fit sock. So this is something that I have worked out for me is my best fit. But I am, like I said, I'm making this for my mom. So I'm kind of working with like a general perfect fit formula. So I've done some increasing here in the last part of the leg. And that after the increasing, I want to have several rows. I want to have about 3 rows before I do the waist yarn and like the stitches to pick up the afterthought heel. So 3 rows in was like 3 rows of orange. So I'm like, do I keep going on the orange to finish the stripe? I don't know. And so last week I had already placed the waist yarn. Oh my gosh, I guess I didn't get that out of my eyeball. We'll be okay. I just decided to go ahead and split the stripe, but then I just really didn't like it. It was just eating at me, and I was finding myself not wanting to work on the socks, so I knew that I probably was just not liking the way that it looked. As soon as I fixed it, which was only maybe 2 days ago, I just started flying on the foot of the sock. So I knew that was the right decision to go back. So I did end up adding more rows. So I updated my Ravelry notes. Basically, I did a heel transition here. Then I did a whole bunch of extra rows. I think like 5 extra rows here on the leg. And that allowed me to place my waist yarn for the afterthought heel between stripes. And then I just think it's going to look so much better. That was a really long explanation for basically I fixed something that I didn't like. And I'm really happy that I did. So this sock is sock number 1 of the pair. Hopefully I can finish up the toe. I think, where am I going to end? I don't know exactly. I'm trying to think if it would be better to start the second sock first or go ahead and do the heel. I might go ahead and start the second sock because I think I'm going to be somewhat close to the end of a repeat. And I want to be able to pull out and cut my yarn and start this striping sequence exactly where I started this one, which is on that darker blue color. So I will see about that. I might just go ahead and complete both socks, then go back and add the heels at a later time. We'll see. And then I'm also kind of excited to see how much yarn I have left after that, because I might make a second pair of socks. These are for my mom, but I might make a pair maybe for my mother-in-law, so that I can just use up more of the yarn, use up what I have here. All right, that's about it. It's basically just a 2x2 ribbed sock. Oh yes, I'm keeping the 2x2 rib on the front of the sock and then just doing stripes on the back. This color is looking really, really fun. So that's the knitting that I've done this week. I would say the majority of it has been done in the car, which is probably going to be my life for the rest of this year and next year. But I am getting excited to get into making some other projects. I want to make a blanket with the yarns that I've been buying. I'll be explaining that next actually, because I have a really large acquisition section to talk about right now. But I am getting excited to start some new projects. So I know that that's a sign of me feeling a little more settled. We're finally out of transition mode. We're finally into our new home that's going to be our space for the next few months until we're back in Tennessee for a little bit. So I'm just feeling really happy and excited about my knitting this week. Turns out I had a giant eyelash in my eye, but I got it out. So I think we're good. All right, I have so many fun things to show you, mostly yarn, but a couple of other things that I have picked up on our adventures over the last week. We have been all around East Tennessee and we're now in Kentucky. So this is where all of these things come from. So let's just go in order of the first thing. So this was a gift to me from Tasha, who is a viewer of the podcast. Hi, Tasha. It was so nice to meet you. So they sell this in the store in Chattanooga, the Chattanooga Yarn Company. It is like a fob kind of that you can put your scissors on one side and stitch markers on the other, but in a really beautiful design. It's super cool. I haven't opened it up yet because I wanted to show it here on the podcast first. It's just called like a scissor fob. So it's a fun way to not lose your scissors in your bag because they're hooked onto something. So I thought that was super duper cool. All right, next up, I got my Tennessee yarn. So I haven't fully fleshed out exactly what I'm going to do, but my plan is to get at least one local yarn in each state. And with that local yarn, I want to be making something along the way of my travels, a blanket. I want to be making a blanket, and I want it to be doable with as many yarn stores as we go to. If we go to one yarn store in the state, great. If we go to 12, great. And I want to be able to incorporate those yarns into this blanket, but make it easy, fast, and doable. So I'm thinking right now I'm going to make a crocheted hexagon blanket, and I'll make the hexagons along the way. And I think there's a way to do it where you can attach them as you go, which would be fantastic. It would make it very random. Part of me is wondering if it'd be better to make them all separate and then assemble them later. But another part of me is thinking that it would be cool to have them in order of the states that we visit and also have it be finished as I go and not have a whole nother blanket to assemble when we're done traveling. So this yarn is from Clinch River Yarns, but that's a store, but the yarn is dyed by one of the owners, Robin, and her company is called Just a Girl and Her Dog. You can see it says hand dyed in Tennessee. So this color is Plum Island. She said this was one of her most popular colors. It was the very last one in the store, and it's beautiful, like purples and oranges, very much fall-like, which I think is great because I want to get something locally dyed, but I also want to get something that's just like feels like the area that we're in. So I really like this. The other cool thing about this skein, and there was a lot of these in there, is it is 125 grams. So even though I'm not going to need a whole lot of it for my blanket, it would actually be a really great one to do maybe like really, I can't think of another word, but skimpy. That's not what I mean, but like tank tops that don't have a lot of fabric to them, like something cropped, kind of like what I'm wearing today, something cropped, something with skinny straps, where you need like just a little more than a skein. This would be really, really great for that. But this is going to be going into my blanket or maybe blankets. I'm not 100% sure yet, but one yarn down, one state down, Tennessee is ticked off the list. Now we went to a lot of other stores in Tennessee. I did get a mini skein at all of them, but I didn't bring those with me because I don't have any plans for those right now. So I actually left those behind in Tennessee. But at Walther Handmade, I got this, which is a cotton, what did Jillian call it? Maybe like a pot holder, I think, but I'm kind of planning to use it as like kind of a hot pad for hot dishes. I can like put my dishes on it. It's all cotton, so it can go in the microwave and then you can like take your things out. I have some dishcloths that I've made out of cotton that's what we use them for. We put them underneath a bowl. Actually, I have a bowl. This bowl is not microwavable, but just say that it was. I put it on the bowl, put it into the microwave, and in that way, when I'm taking it out of the microwave, I don't have to touch the hot bowl or get another tool or whatever, and then I can hold it in my hands while I'm eating on the couch because I always eat on the couch. So I just really liked these colors, the yellows and the grays. I thought it was really pretty. And it is woven by Jillian, who is the owner of Walther Handmade. She's also the person who coordinated, did a big part of coordinating the Great Tennessee Yarn Tour. So it was cool to meet her. She was super sweet and I was really excited to get something from her shop. Let's see. Okay, next up, and again, I am not mentioning every single store that we went to in Tennessee. That is all in the Great Tennessee Yarn Tour video though, and I have all the mini skeins that I got in that video if you want to see all of that. But the next thing is we were at the Appalachian, hold on, wait, I didn't write this down perfectly, so I've got it right here on my phone. I have all my notes somewhere. It is called Appalachian Yarn Company, and the farm is actually called something else. Where did I write that one down? I don't have it, but it's definitely in that video. It's an alpaca farm, and they have alpaca yarn, but they also had alpaca rug yarn and alpaca rugs. So technically, this is a placemat. It's really small, but I thought, how cute would it be to have a tiny rug for our tiny home and just make it feel really homey and warm things up. So this rug is like, it's hardy, but it's also soft, and I just liked the colors and the fringe. So this is going to be going into our like just little galley walkway here. So we just have a little something to warm things up. I was way too excited about it. They have full-size rugs, of course, too, and like runners and everything, but I wanted to get something for our current home. Then after that, we actually went to a second alpaca farm, Two Roots Alpacas, and I got a set of yarn there. I kind of put together my own set. It looks like I left, oh no, I think I left one in Tennessee. Well, this was bound to happen. That's okay. So essentially, every yarn store on the Great Tennessee Yarn Tour had a special mini skein. And the special mini skein at Two Roots was this color. It's from two different alpaca. I don't have the information on me right now for that, but it was this color. And they had little sets of three yarns together. And I thought, you know, I think I'm going to make my own set because I want to have enough to make a bigger cowl. So I got myself two of these, although one seems to be missing. So I must have left it in Tennessee. Whoops. And I got two of like a medium tan color. And then I got two of a creamy color. And each of these are 25 grams, right? Yeah, 25 grams. So like this is a full skein. So I should have 1.5 skeins. It should be enough to do an infinity scarf is what I'm hoping to do with it. So it looks like I will be adding this. I have a list already to my mom of things that are left at home. So I'm going to put alpaca mini skein on that list. And eventually I'm going to have my mom send us a package because we've forgotten a lot of things. They also put these in my bag. Cute little alpaca note cards. So when I send out some prizes, I'll be sending that with it. And then I received from my friend Nancy. I got to see her in, where were we in Tennessee? It was our last yarn store. and it's called Carriage House, Kingsport. We are in Kingsport, Tennessee, in East Tennessee. And Nancy, when I saw her a few weeks ago in Nashville, had been knitting a yarn cozy out of this really fun yarn, and I just thought it was so cute. And she finished the yarn cozy. She said she was done with the yarn. She remembered that I liked it, and she gifted me her leftovers, which I thought was so nice. So this is the Lemonade Shop. And I think she said they're not making this color anymore, which makes it even more special. And it is called Gumdrop. And look how fun this color is. It's so much fun. I need to weigh it and see how much I have, because that will kind of determine if I want to do maybe a couple cozies or maybe some shorty socks or something like that. I did not bring a single pair of hand knitted socks in the van because we're going back in fall. And so I didn't think I was going to need them, but if I can make a couple shorties, that would be really fun. She also gave me this really cute stitch marker. It's a macaron. Isn't it so cute? I love it. Thank you, Nancy. So I got to figure out what to do with that. If you can't tell already, my yarn cabinet that I started out with 2 days ago, kind of with a little bit of space, is already getting very full. Kit was like, "You're already out of space in the yarn cabinet." I'm like, "I know." I guess like logistically this was bound to happen because we're traveling to yarn stores. So that's why I need to start my blanket, so I can start using up yarn and then giving away things that I'm not going to need anymore. So yeah, I need to get going on these things. Okay, a couple more things. I met my friend Tamara in Nashville at SSK a couple weeks ago, and we had told her we're going to be coming up to Lexington. She lives in Lexington, and so she said she had some yarn for me she meant to bring me at SSK. And I was like, well, we'll see you in Lexington. That'll be perfect. So we got to meet up with her yesterday, and Danielle as well. And she was able to gift me this. Tamara was able to gift me this. So let me think about the details on this. This is from Deep Dyed Yarns. It is a Kentucky yarn. And this yarn is called, the color is called Run for the Roses. And it's something about the race, I think, or the Derby or something like that. There are horses everywhere here in Kentucky. But I can't remember exactly the details. Hand dyed in Nicholasville, Kentucky. And it is a merino, bamboo, and nylon, which is really interesting. Actually, the next yarn I'm going to show you is also blended with bamboo, something that I haven't seen before in hand-dyed yarns. So this is very cool that this one keeps popping up. So thank you, Tamara, for the beautiful yarn. I have another one to add to my Kentucky collection. Okay, last thing. I'm looking around to make sure. Last thing is I wanted to get Kentucky yarn for my blanket. I have already my Tennessee yarn, right? And I was just thinking like, okay, Natalie, think about yourself. I am somebody who likes to match yarn bases in projects. I like the fibers to be the same. I like the plies to be the same. Obviously the weight of the yarn to be the same. And thinking about making this blanket where I'm traveling for 2 years into all different stores, just started snoring. I just knew that that wasn't going to be possible. Like it wasn't going to be possible to select a yarn base in Tennessee and then guarantee to see it everywhere for the rest of our time traveling. So as much as it pains me, these are not the same bases. That's okay. Actually, I guess I could have used this yarn. I didn't even think about that. Those do kind of like go into each other pretty well. I'll have to think about that. Maybe I will do that. Anyhow, I picked out a yarn at a yarn store, the Kentucky yarn store that we were at yesterday, called Rebel. We have a whole video coming out for Rebel. It's such a cute shop. I have a little more to share about it in the live segment, but you'll also be able to see it all in our video next week. But I wanted to get something special from that store. And there are two owners of the store, Robin and Sarah, and they both dye yarn, though running the store is their full-time job. So they don't dye yarn super often. They do really special ones for their anniversary every year, which is coming up on September 9th. So there was just a little bit to choose from in the shop, and I ended up choosing one from Sarah. This is called Fluorite. I went ahead and had it wound because I don't have my ball winder with me. It's a really pretty, like soft, what is that color called? Not aqua, not teal, I don't know, bluey green and purple. And this one is also bamboo and merino. So no nylon, superwash, merino and bamboo. So another instance of seeing bamboo in a sock yarn, which I think is so interesting. So I'm excited to work that up. So that's it. I know that was a lot of yarns. But I am so excited. I guess I will probably have a couple of things to share every single week, at least a skein of yarn for my blanket. This is it so far. And hopefully next week, maybe, we have a busy week this week, but maybe I'll have some time over the weekend to actually get started on my adventure blanket, my hexagon blanket, where I can incorporate yarns from all over the US. I've just turned on my fan because it was getting a little bit warm. Hopefully you can't hear it too much. Again, we're trying out a lot of new things today in a new space, so you can just let us know if you do hear anything, and just know that we're going to work to make it the best sound, the best lighting, the best footage in our new space, but it's going to take us a couple tries, so just bear with us with everything. All right, let's get into our questions. First question today is from Gloria. Hi, Natalie. Do you have any tips on making a garment with acrylic yarn? I have a bunch of leftover acrylic yarn from an abandoned temperature blanket, and I think I could make a top or two with the leftovers. My question is how to handle the gauge swatch, since acrylic yarn will not really be affected by blocking. Do I just knit my gauge swatch to the recommended gauge after blocking without actually blocking? That is a great question. So you're absolutely right about acrylic yarns, and I would say a lot of yarns that are synthetic, they're not going to really change that much like natural fibers will when they get wet or when they get worn. But I have heard that acrylic yarns can be like smoothed out or relaxed a little bit by steam blocking. So maybe that's something you can try. You could try steaming your swatch, whether you have an iron and you just want to do it like not touching the acrylic. Of course, you don't want to melt it, but like hovering over it, or maybe you have an actual steamer. That could work really well to get an accurate gauge. My only other thing I want to say is be careful, be very selective about what type of item you make with acrylic yarn or what type of garment. I have made only 2 sweaters, or I made one for myself and one for Kent out of acrylic yarn. I don't remember if it was, I think it was just 100% acrylic. It was Vanna's choice, and your yarn may be different. And this was many years ago, so acrylic yarns I know have changed a lot, but I would be cautious about making anything that's a pullover because acrylic is really, really hot. It doesn't breathe and it traps heat, and it can also be very stiff. Like the fabric it makes can be not as drapey as natural fibers, which is a little bit less desirable for worn items. So just be cautious. I'm not saying it's like no good for garments at all. I would just think about like if you see maybe a really flowy top and the designer made it with alpaca or something that's like really flowy, just know that the effect you're going to get with acrylic will be different, and maybe choose accordingly. I feel like cardigans can be really good in acrylic because you have some breathing room, right? It's not a pullover, so cardigans are fantastic for that. And maybe even a pullover if you are in a colder climate. Again, from my personal experience, I don't enjoy wearing my pullover that's acrylic because it is just that hot. It is like an outside item. But I think a cardigan would be a whole lot better. Okay, next question. This one is from Vivian. How would you recommend to store leftover yarn? I just learned that it's best to leave the yarn as a hank and not to store yarn as cakes, after being on a winding roll and having wound up about 25 cakes of hand-dyed yarn. Thinking it would be easier to store and also ready to grab. But now I've learned that it creates tension on the yarn as opposed to leaving it as a skein. Now I'm wondering how to store yarn that's partly used. For example, I've knitted shorty socks from a sock set and have more than half a cake left over. As I've used it from the center, it doesn't feel like it has a lot of tension in the cake. But should I rewind into a cake or ball? I want to keep it for another scrappy project in the future. Also, thank you for your podcasts and videos. Looking forward to the ones on the road. Hey, welcome to the first one from the road. Okay, this is a great question, and it made me laugh when you said you got on a winding roll because I totally did that when I first got my very first winder. I didn't even have yarn that was in skeins. I had yarn that was just in those like oblong balls, and I was so excited, and I just thought I'm going to wind everything into cakes, and I spent hours just winding everything up because it was so much fun. So I totally get it. I also don't think you've ruined your yarns. They're going to be okay. But for the future, it is best to leave yarns. This is a different yarn for something else. It is best to leave yarns like this until you're ready to use them. One, I think they just store better and stack better. I know they're easy to grab, but like as soon as you wind it into a cake and then start moving it around, it just kind of starts to fall apart. Whereas this really stays together really, really great. I also find it easier to imagine the yarn as a finished piece when it's like this and versus when it's in the cake. I feel like it's harder to tell what it's going to look like when it's in the cake. And then, yeah, just the tension on the yarn. So you're right about that. For the future, maybe consider just keeping your yarns in a hank until they're ready to be used. So for leftovers, that's a really great question. So my preference when I have yarn leftover is to rewind it after I'm done. So you can see that this yarn is starting to cone, or I don't know what people call it. It's starting to make a little mountain. Like as you pull from the center, it starts to come up. The yarn cozy really helps to keep it from completely unraveling, and it will hold it all the way to the very end. But if I do have 40 or so grams left over, I will be rewinding this probably before using it again. When I'm at home and I have my ball winder, I will just wind it into a cake for my ball winder. But if I'm not at home or if it's a smaller amount, like maybe 10 grams, I'll just wind it into a ball. And I feel like a ball is a really great way to wind it that doesn't add a lot of tension. However, I feel like when you rewind a cake, when you wind on a ball winder from a cake, it also doesn't have as much tension as it does when you're winding from a skein or from a swift, right? So when your yarn is a hank on the swift, it has a lot of tension on it. But when you rewind it from here, it doesn't have as much tension on it. So I will rewind my cakes onto a ball winder when I'm done with them to store them as leftovers. I think that that's totally fine. I have not ever noticed that those yarns have acted completely differently after having rewound them. So I actually saw something not too long ago where somebody was saying that like you should rewind all of your cakes. Like you should wind them off the Swift, and then you should immediately rewind them so that they don't have that extra tension from being off of the Swift. I would say that that's probably not needed for most people, but maybe if you are storing your yarns in cakes like you said you were, maybe it would be worth doing that so they just don't have quite as much tension on them. Who knows? I don't do that. I don't think that that's really like, I think you're still going to be able to knit and crochet with them, but you could try it. Maybe that would help. Next up, we have a question from Iriada? I don't know. I don't know if I'm saying that completely right. Let me know if you hear this question. All right, Natalie, have you had much experience flying with knitting needles? I'm visiting my parents in Florida soon, and I really want to work on some socks on the plane. I recently bought some Knitter's Pride Mindful DPNs, and I really don't want to lose them to TSA. Maybe I should use wooden needles and put the metal ones in a checked bag. I also understand that there's no guaranteed outcome when traveling with needles. I think someone should survey knitters to analyze the statistics of confiscated needles. So that was the question. There's another part on here that actually I'll come back to in just a second. So I have never had an issue flying with knitting needles. The only sort of issue I had one time was that I had my sock needles, I believe. Yeah, my sock needles. These, my Chow Goose, they're metal. They were in a case pushed together like this. So they looked very pointy and intimidating when they went through the carry-on bag check. I don't know what that thing is called. So all that happened was the TSA agent opened my bag, found them and went, oh, they're knitting needles. and then said I was good to go. That doesn't mean that that's going to happen for everyone, because the TSA rules, they allow knitting needles, but the other TSA rule is that it's up to the agent. And that goes for anything. So yes, you can't guarantee the outcome. It's good that you already have that mindset going into things. I really think you'll probably be fine with your metal DPNs. If you want to just bring the one set of them and maybe have your wooden ones as a backup, and know that the worst case will be that you're going to lose those metal ones, maybe you can do that. I tend to always, not really anymore actually, just because flying domestically in the US, I've just never had an issue. But usually I have more than one project. So if for some reason I did find that these needles, the metal ones, were problematic, I have another project on wooden needles that I can work on until I can replace my needles. And I do mentally prepare myself for that scenario. If somebody said that I can't bring these knitting needles, I would be like, all right, and just pull the needles out and take my project with me and replace my needles at another time. So I am mentally prepared. I feel like the worst case scenario for me is not having entertainment on the plane. Maybe that's a silly thing. So that's covered by my two projects. So hopefully that helps you out a little bit. I've heard other people say the same thing. They haven't had any problems flying domestically in the US. Of course, you can never know for sure, but I think you'll be okay. Now, this other part of your question wasn't really a question, it was a suggestion, but I wanted to bring it up. So here is what it says. I sew, and I just wanted to chime in on your bra solution brainstorm. I think that sewing the pads directly to the shirt may be problematic. The first issue is that they won't provide the support you're looking for because they aren't connected to a more snug lining that sits closer to the body. Rather, they'll hover unless the shirt possesses significant negative ease. I also think that the stitches will ruin the prettiness of the knitted front. These stitches may also draw attention to that area in a way you may not prefer. Apologies for the long message, but I hope you take these points into consideration. Some people have mentioned pasties, but personally I don't like them from a sensory standpoint. And while bandeau bras are strapless, they can squish the girls into a uniboob and slip down easily. Hence, I think a racerback bra or a bra which you can cross the back straps are some viable solutions. But I'm just a person on the internet after all, so you should go with what feels right to you. So to catch everyone up, in case you didn't see my episode last week when I finished a tank top, I was trying to figure out a bra solution because like this top right now, I love so much because it has a built-in pads, like built-in elastic right here and everything, and I don't have to wear a bra. I don't have to worry about my bra showing. It is the best. And so when I've been knitting a couple of tank tops this summer, I finished 2 recently, and I wanted a solution where I could just have maybe sew in some bra pads straight into the knitting. I'm fortunate enough to not need a ton of support, but I do need a little bit of shaping. I'm not comfortable just doing a no bra thing. So the pasties to me I have some really great ones, but they don't have enough support for like a knitted item. Like they're good for formal wear. And also I would have to wear them a lot, which would feel a little bit wasteful, I think. So yeah, you're right. That's probably not going to work. And I definitely don't do strapless. We don't wear strapless anymore. I can't stand when it squishes down. Like I don't like the look for me. And also I hate fussing with my stuff. So you're probably right. I probably need to just find a bra that I can cross the straps with. But I'll figure it out one day. I brought both my tank tops with me. I brought the bra pads that I ordered on Amazon. So I'll have to figure it out. What do you see, buddy? It's just stopped raining, so I might get to go outside after this for a little bit. I got to do a little bit of work outside this morning, which was very nice. All right, we have 2 more questions. Is that right? Yes, 2 more questions. So let's get to the next one from Ursina F. Question. I've been crocheting a bunch of granny squares for a blanket, very much inspired by you. However, I've noticed my first 20-ish squares being a lot bigger than my last 20-ish squares. Probably my attention has changed. I'm worried that this could be a problem when assembling. Any tips? I don't really want to redo the squares, especially since all the ends are woven in already. I'm using the same hook and everything. I totally empathize with you on this because this happened to me with my granny square blanket that I finished back in February. So that blanket I had been working on for 5 years. So some of my squares that I had done 5 years ago were smaller than the ones that I had done more recently. So my problem was the opposite of yours, where my squares actually got bigger. Wait, no, wait, is that what you said too? My 20-ish squares are bigger than my last ones. Okay, so yes, opposite problem of you, whereas yours are getting smaller, mine were getting bigger. So the first thing that I did when I went to assemble my blanket is I laid all my squares out and I tried to just disperse the different size squares. I didn't have quite as many as 20. I probably had maybe 6 to 10. But I just tried to make them like not all in one spot. That was my first thought is, oh, I'll put them all in a row, but then the whole row would be smaller. So I dispersed them. There were probably a 1/2 inch to an inch difference in those squares versus the majority of my squares. And when I dispersed them, I didn't notice any differences. Since you're saying that all your squares that you're making now are actually smaller, I might suggest going up a hook size and trying to see if you can match those first 20 squares, because I think it will be easier to fit around 20 squares that are a little small into a blanket of 40 squares that are all the same size larger. I think that would be easier than fitting like than the odd squares, the 20 outliers being bigger than all the rest of the squares. Does that make sense? So if the majority of the squares are the larger ones, all the same size, I think it will be easier to disperse the smaller ones. So that's what I would do. If anyone else has any suggestions, feel free to leave them down below. It's always helpful to get the community's input. All right, this last question is a bit of a fun one, a little bit more of a controversial question, which I like. I love doing just kind of opinion things in the knitting world because there's no right answer, especially for this. And it's just interesting to see how people think differently. I would definitely say that there are opinions that people have that once I hear their explanation, it opens me up and changes my mind on things. So I am curious to see what y'all think about this one too. I probably made it sound even more controversial than it actually is, but it's not that spicy. Let's get into it. Okay, this question is from Jess. How do you feel about knitting while in a meeting? I hear quite a few people who knit during work meetings or places like church. I'm honestly not sure how I feel. Great question. Okay, here's my opinion. And of course, again, everyone can have their own opinion on this. And I think that the biggest thing is that it completely depends. It depends on the knitter. It depends on the situation. It depends on the people that you're around. It depends on so much. So if you're somebody who feels very strongly that you shouldn't knit in like XYZ place and you're judging other people for it, let's talk about it for a second. And this person that asked the question doesn't sound like they're doing that. They're just kind of asking for like, I'm not sure how I feel. So my thoughts are that if you can knit or even crochet or do something else, draw, whatever it is, while paying attention, while showing that you're paying attention and not distracting others, that it's not an issue. I think that bigger issue is communication. So when I'm in a scenario that involves other people, I am thinking about, am I being a distraction? Am I noticeable? Do I have tools in a bright iPad and like yarn and needles and stuff everywhere? Am I knitting like this up high? Am I looking down constantly? Like that is a distraction. That doesn't show that I'm paying attention. That's for at home. That's for at a knitting table, at a yarn store. That's not for a public situation. But if I have something small and I'm able to get it all set up before the show, before the church service starts, before the movie starts, whatever. And I'm able to hold it low like this. And I'm able to do it without looking at it. I'm not saying you have to be able to do it without looking, but I'm able to do it without looking down too much, without being a distraction. I don't think that's problematic at all. I think it's totally fine. And again, it just depends on the situation. So back to the communication piece. I knit at work sometimes. It's dependent. So it would depend on the scenario. If I'm in a parent meeting with like that's serious or something like that, or like basically I haven't met the parent, I'm not going to knit during the meeting, right? Because I want to think about how they're going to feel about my attention, and I want it to be so clear that it is so fully on them. But a different scenario would be like my weekly meetings with my team, with my fellow teachers, who one already know I'm a knitter, who've already seen me knit, who I can even ask like, hey guys, while we're chatting and talking in the meeting, if it's not a distraction to you, I think I would love to be able to just knit. It just helps ease my mind and helps me listen. That's a completely different scenario, and I think it's totally fine. And then another scenario that a lot of us are in right now is Zoom meetings. And I think in Zoom, this is like perfect because a lot of times you're just sitting there listening, right? If you're presenting, that's another thing. You need 100% attention. But if you are listening, I actually find, oh, Toaster, there's a little Dougie outside. Okay, hopefully it's not going to bark too loud anymore. But if you're in Zoom, that's what I was saying, I think. If you're in Zoom and it's actually, the knitting is simple, I find that the knitting actually helps me pay attention better. Like I can, my mind doesn't wander. Instead, it just listens and it focuses and it absorbs so much more so than if I wasn't knitting. I would be like, what do I have to do after this? What are we going to be doing for lunch? I might even be like trying to answer emails or something on a meeting, right? So I find that it actually helps me pay attention even better. And when you're on Zoom, as long as your knitting is like not on the screen, you're really not distracting anybody. So yeah, I would just say it totally depends on you, on how you knit, what you need to knit. Just be mindful always, please be mindful in public of your knitting and crochet, because we want everyone to be thinking and mindful of space, so that we basically, like, I think of it as like, if I'm being respectful and mindful in knitting in a way that is that way, then I'm showing other people who aren't knitters and crocheters that it's like cool and fun and something that you can do and something that is positive. So that's kind of how I like to think about it. I'd love to hear y'all's opinion. I don't think there's a right or wrong. I know that for some people, like even their own parents think it's rude if they knit in front of them. And if my parents, like while having a conversation, if my parents thought that, we would be having some deep discussions. But also, they're my parents, not my coworkers, not my fellow church members, not my, I don't know, I don't know, other situations. But just keep that in mind, and communication is always going to be key. All right, if you have any questions for me that you'd like for me to answer in the next podcast, just leave them down below. Leave a comment with #question in the beginning so I can find your question and answer it next time. A couple of little things to share in the news segment. So first up, the newest video this week was our Great Tennessee Yarn Tour. So I showed you a couple things that I got on the tour, but in that video, we are showing you 13 different stops on the Great Tennessee Yarn Tour. There are 11 yarn stores all over the east side of Tennessee and 2 alpaca farms. I mean, you're going to want to see it just to see the alpaca, I promise you. At each store, they were offering a mini skein for people who were tourists, which means you bought a ticket in advance. So, of course, I had to grab all those mini skeins, so you'll get to see all of those. It was a really great experience. This is the first year that they're doing the Great Tennessee Yarn Tour, and Jillian, the person who made this at Walther Handmade, was one of the main coordinators. We also met other yarn store owners that were part of like a core group. Everyone was so positive. The community feel from the yarn store owners was incredible. So it was a really great experience. So whether you are in Tennessee and you can go to some of those yarn stores, because the yarn tour goes through August 24th of 2023, or maybe you're out of state and you just want to experience it, through the video, I think it's a really, really fun one. And it was so cool to really kick off our traveling adventures in my home state of Tennessee, going to a bunch of yarn stores in Tennessee. Now, next week will be our Kentucky video. Things won't always be exactly this way where we're like one state after the other, but I think for this next little while, we really are going to a lot of different states right away. So our Kentucky video will be at Rebel Yarn. Actually, I think they're just called Rebel, but it's going to be a yarn store tour just on Rebel Yarn. And it was a really great experience. I got to sit down with one of the owners, Robin, and interview her. She told us about how her and Sarah started the store, which is a really cool story. It's in an old house, very, very cute. Lots of different hand-dyed yarns, lots of different crafts in there. And then I got to sit and knit for a little while. It was really great. It was such a great experience. So that will be coming up next week. Now, again, just the Great Tennessee Yarn Tour goes from August 4th to August 27th of 2023. I'll put the link to the tour down below. And then coming up this week, we are going to be in Indiana on the Pearl, Indiana Yarn Crawl. Pearl is an acronym for Peace, Unity, Love, and Respect. There are 5 stops on this yarn crawl, so we're going to be going to all of them, of course. And this one's a little bit shorter. It's August 11th through the 19th. But if you're in Indiana, you can check it out. They have a Facebook page. I'll leave it down below. You can check it out, see if you're close to any of the shops. And I hope to be at some of the different knit nights this week, hanging out with the community. There is so much life to share with you over the past week. So let's see how much we can fit into this little segment. So last week, where I left you off, last Monday, we were packing up our van. We weren't 100% sure if we were going to leave Nashville to go on the Great Tennessee Yarn Tour with our van, or if we were going to need to drop our van off to get a part that it needed, an essential part. It was drivable, but this part affected airbags, so it's pretty important for our safety. If we were going to need to drop it off and then pivot and do something else to go on the Great Tennessee Yarn Tour. So ultimately, we were waiting for 2 weeks for this part. Our van was just sitting in the shop at the dealership, like we couldn't get it prepared. It just really was frustrating because we couldn't move on with what we needed to do. But we finally got somebody that came in. I don't know if they were on vacation or something, but they came in and they were like, the part is coming. It's going to be here Wednesday. It's shipped. If you bring it here, it'll be ready for you to pick up when you're back. So we were like, all right, that's the best decision. It's the safest decision. And it ended up being a really good thing. So on Tuesday morning, Kent drove the van down. I drove behind him in my mom's minivan. We dropped off our van to wait for the part to come on Wednesday. And then we took my mom's car to East Tennessee to do the yarn tour. So it ended up being great. Toaster got to stay at home with my parents. They watched him for that time, which was awesome. And Kent and I got to start our adventure going to all the Tennessee yarn stores. So we went to 4 stores on Tuesday. And again, all of the details on this are in the Great Tennessee Yarn Tour video that came out on Tuesday. And I got to collect all my minis, and it was really, really fun. But you can see more of it there. I'm just going to touch on a few things here. So Tuesday, we went to 4 new stores to me, and we got to use our brand new camera, which I'm using right now. We also got to use our drone. I have a little video of Kent flying the drone over one of the stores, Kudzu Cottage, and it was really cool. We didn't use the drone a ton because there's definitely a lot of regulations and we want to be safe with the drone. But it was cool to get that scenery. East Tennessee is so beautiful and it was so green right now, which was great. So that was really fun. On Wednesday, we went to 4 more stores. There's 13 totals. We went to 4 more stores. And that evening, we ended in Maryville at Hook and Needle. And so I got to sit and hang out with them for a bit. They have all these cute chairs, different mismatched chairs around a big rug and trunk and stuff. It was really nice to sit and hang out with the owner, Christy, and a few other people there. It was wonderful. We then went through the park, the Smoky Mountain National Park. So I took a couple pictures in there. I actually have I need to update my photos of my mini mock neck tank that I'm wearing in Ravelry. And about that time, we got some great news that our van was ready. So that was on Wednesday. We dropped off Tuesday morning. Wednesday, the part came in as it was supposed to. It got installed and our van was ready to go. So we still had another day and a half in Tennessee or in East Tennessee, but we were so grateful to know that when we came back on Friday, our van would be ready for pickup. So we stayed that night in Gatlinburg, Tennessee, and our hotel room had a balcony over the little river, I think is what it's called. So it was really cool. I got to sit out there in the morning, answer a few emails, listen to the river. It was awesome. The only downside was that there wasn't an open window. It was too hot anyway, but Kent wanted to have the window open to hear the river at night, and there wasn't any window to open. So that didn't happen. But maybe when we're somewhere else, we can do that. We also did a beer tasting in Gatlinburg that night. I am learning that I really like sour beers all of a sudden. I don't know. So I had fun doing a little tasting there. It was really great. Then on Thursday, we went to the final 5 out of 13 stores in the Great Tennessee Yarn Tour, which included 2 alpaca farms. So again, just a little plug for the video. You're going to want to see all the alpaca. It was so much fun. On Thursday evening, we drove all the way back to Nashville, which we were in Kingsport that night, at another knit night actually, at Carriage House. And so it was about a 4-hour drive. So we got home around midnight, I think. And then we got up the next day. We're just so exhausted. But we got up the next day. We drove about 45 minutes away where our van was being repaired, picked it up, brought it back, and just spent most of the day Friday getting everything loaded back in here, figuring everything out so that we could get ready to leave officially on Saturday. Another fun thing that happened on Friday is I got to go, Toaster, why are you looking at? I got to meet my new niece. My brother and his wife just got a new puppy. None of us have kids. We all have dogs. So I have a picture that my mom snapped of me with their dog, Harry, who's a standard poodle, mini standard poodle. It's supposed to be a mini poodle, but he is all black, so he's got black fur and like really dark black eyes. And then their new puppy is also a standard poodle, but it's a girl, and her name is Belle, and she is a white poodle, and she has blue eyes and a brown nose and like brown paw pads. And she literally, when my sister-in-law was holding her when she met us at the door, she looked like a little lamb. She is so cute. So it was fun that we got to, like, if we hadn't have had to come back to get our van, we wouldn't have gotten to meet Belle. So I was excited about that. There was also a couple other things that we were waiting on to be delivered for our van that we got to pick up. And also, like, our Tuesday through Thursday were so busy going in and out of yarn stores. It would have been really stressful, I think, for Toaster to be staying in the van for the first time alone. Even though it's air conditioned and safe and everything in here, I think that would have just stressed him out. So all in all, it ended up working out, and now we're officially on the road. So Saturday around maybe 1 o'clock, we left in a storm. It was raining really hard, but we wanted to go ahead and get out and drive up to Kentucky because we had plans for a yarn store tour on Sunday. So Saturday we drove about 3 hours into I can't remember. I think it was called Bardstown. It was a really cute town. And Kent wanted to do some bourbon tastings. I do not like bourbon, so it was perfect because Kent got to do bourbon tastings and I got to drive, or I was able to drive. So we were completely safe. We both got to enjoy things. So Kent was doing his bourbon tastings, and Toaster and I were here in the van. He got really comfortable sitting here. I was working, answering emails again. We picked up some dinner. It was a good first night staying at a campsite and everything. We got it mostly figured out. And then we set up our bed for the first time. That's something we hadn't done yet either. We really had plans to practice all of these things, but we had such limited time with our van that it didn't end up happening. So we got our beds all set up, and it ended up being pretty comfortable. I guess you can probably see this. This is one of the 3-inch foam that goes over all of this. So this is already pretty comfortable, but then with the 3-inch foam, everything is really good. Now that brings us to Sunday, and Sunday is when we ended up in Lexington, Kentucky. So from I feel like I'm not saying it right, Bardstown? I don't remember. From there, we drove about an hour into Lexington, Kentucky, where we met up with Robin, one of the owners of Rebel Yarn, and we filmed a yarn store tour at Rebel. So we like to film yarn store tours when the shop is not open, because then we can talk, we can walk around without having to worry about interrupting anyone shopping. So that was really, really great. After we filmed the tour, I actually got to sit and knit for a few hours. That's when Danielle and Tamara came that I had met at SSK, and we got to hang out. There's a really cute tea shop next door. It's tea and bakery. It's called Olive's Apron. So I got a little tea. I got a walnut and dark chocolate scone and sat and knit for a long time. And it was just so nice. I could feel myself getting very, very tired after all that we've been doing, but it was a nice little reprieve. And then we went to dinner with Tamara and Danielle and their husbands. We had some Mexican food. I had a sangria. It was a great way to end the day. And then that brings us to here. Last night we stayed here in Lexington at the Horse Park, I think it's called. It's a really nice campground. Really, really enjoying this space. It's nice, kind of nice today because even though it's been rainy, it's kind of cooled off. So we don't have our air conditioning running right now. It's definitely a little warm, but with this big old fan and with some of the windows open, it's really not too terrible. When we have our air conditioning on, it's like absolutely freezing in here. It's just a little bit loud. So we're definitely learning a lot about van life already. This is our first, I would say, work day in the van. We're actually sitting here working with our computers. So this morning I was sitting back here. We have little tables that go up right here, working and prepping for the podcast. And then since I'm back here recording, Kent's in the front seat, which swivels around, and he's got a little table there, and he's editing our Great Tennessee Yarn Tour. So I would say all in all, we're learning and we're figuring things out. And for 2 days into van life, I'm feeling really, really good with where we're at. So let's talk about watching and reading. I'm not really watching anything right now. I caught up on The Bachelor. That's about it. I haven't really had a lot of time for TV. And I also haven't really been reading a lot. Today was the first day in maybe a week where I actually got to sit in the morning and do my knitting and reading. I actually sat outside and sat at a picnic table. It was raining, so our awning from our van came over it. Got to sit at the picnic table. It was a little sticky, but not hot. It was just raining, so it was so humid out there, but it was fun. It was really, really great. I hope that there's a lot of days like that where it's cool enough in the morning that I'm sitting outside knitting and reading and drinking my coffee to start the day. So that was really good, but I am still reading the same book. I'm reading Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. I'm 60% into the book. I'm not sure I love it, honestly. I'm going to finish it because it is an interesting story and it's a very different read, but it's one of those books that I feel like it's going in circles and I'm not really sure where it's headed. So I was trying to think about that, about myself. What does that say about me? That I like books where I kind of understand where the overall story is going, if not every twist and turn. But this one, I'm like, where are we going to end? Like, I don't know what's going to happen. So it'll be interesting. It's a book about two people mainly, Sam and Sadie. And they are video game designers, and they're working together on multiple video games, and it just kind of tells the story of their life. And they're both like not great people. They're human. And so there's no hero. I think that's what's interesting, is like there's no hero in the story. There's nobody who, despite their faults, we love them kind of thing. It's like two people with a lot of faults, and it's very real. So it's a very different story for me, but I want to finish it, and then I have many books lined up for next. So I'm enjoying getting back into the routine and getting into van life. That brings us to our tip of the week. And for this one, I actually went a few weeks back in the questions and found one to answer. So this is from KSZH4IS. Question. I'm making some good progress with a pullover made with commercial wool. The company is called Grun. I don't know how to say that, if that says anything to you. The thing is, there's quite a few knots in some of the balls of yarn. How can I best hide their existence in my knitting? Okay, most people, whether you knit or crochet, you've probably come across this before, where there is a knot tied in your ball or skein of yarn.
What I've heard that this means from people who make yarn is that the end of the like larger thing that's making the yarn has ended, and it happened in the middle of a skein. So it happened when you were 25 grams in or 50 grams into making a skein of yarn. Rather than trashing all of that and starting a new one, you tie a knot. Now, I've also heard that there should not be more than 3 knots in a yarn or in a skein. That should make it basically unsellable. I really hate it when there's any in mine, but it does happen sometimes. So the best thing to do is to actually cut out the knot and weave in those 2 ends that you create. This is hands down the best thing, because sometimes the knot not only will be noticeable or come through to the other side, it could also come apart, and therefore it will start to unravel. So this is where my tip comes in, and it works for like anything. Sometimes you might find a big old fluff in your yarn that you can't get rid of, and that is how to create ends when you don't have scissors. This is something that I actually use pretty often. So let me get here to the middle of my row and I can kind of explain. So let's say you're in public, because usually that's when you find a knot, and you either don't have scissors or you don't want to cut your yarn right now, but let's just say right here in my yarn, okay, you can't see it, but let's just say somewhere down here, I have a knot. So I want to leave enough yarn that I can have a tail before the knot. So let's say the knot's here. And then I want to loop up enough yarn after the knot that I will also have a tail. So we're going to pretend the knot is down here at the bottom of this loop that I've now created. And each of these strands are going to be ends later on, but I haven't cut my yarn yet. I've basically just looped it with the knot down here at the bottom. Then I just take my working yarn and I continue to knit. I'll show you what it looks like. I do this all the time when I, again, just don't want to get scissors or can't be bothered to get scissors. So it looks like this. Let's see if you can see it. I've got a double loop. Oh, come on, focus. There we go. I've got a double loop coming out here where we're pretending that there's a knot at the end here. And each of these strands are long enough to be woven in. So when I'm ready to, I can just tuck this into my sock or whatever I'm making for now. But when I'm ready to weave in ends, once I have enough fabric, I will then cut here at the end of the loop, cutting out the knot, and I'll have 2 ends to weave in. And I don't know why being able to do this little loop-de-loop thing is so helpful, but it is, because sometimes your yarn isn't breakable, you don't have scissors, and it just comes in handy. So that's my really weird and random tip of the week. And also, to the person who asked that question, I would suggest cutting out your knots rather than knitting them in. All right, everyone. Thanks for joining me for the first podcast episode here in the van. Oh, by the way, her name is Lydia. I don't think we've shared that yet. So thanks for coming. Next week, I'll be coming to you from a brand new location. It'll be really fun to just change things up week over week. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.